There was a woman live streaming from my couch, her kids eating my frozen pizza, and my name was trending online as a criminal, all while I stood outside my own house, holding my own damn keys. I wasn't being robbed. I was being rebranded as the villain in some unhinged HOA livestream saga, starring a bleach blonde woman who called herself Chairwoman Lana and treated my ranch like her personal influencer set. And the worst part? Thousands of people were donating to her. I install security systems for a living, which means every second of this circus was recorded. What would you do if strangers hijacked your house and made you the bad guy? Drop your answer in the comments, because the way I handled it turned into the wildest showdown this HOA scammer never saw coming. Let me back up and explain how I ended up in this situation. My name is Dean Whitaker, and I'm 34 years old. I install security cameras and alarm systems for a living, which means I know a thing or two about keeping people safe from intruders. 8 months ago, I went through a messy divorce that left me financially drained and emotionally exhausted. I used what was left of my savings to buy a 15-acre working ranch outside Phoenix, complete with a main house, barn, and small cattle operation. I figured the peace and quiet of rural life would help me rebuild. Plus, the ranch was perfect for testing security systems across large properties for potential clients. I had just finished a big installation job at a resort in Arizona, setting up their entire security network over 3 weeks. The job went so well that I wrapped up 2 days early, which meant I could finally get home and relax in my own space. My ex-wife had taken our kids on their planned vacation to her parents' place in Colorado, so I was looking forward to some quiet time at the ranch before they returned next week. I was excited to test the new camera system I had installed around the ranch property before I left, check on the small herd of cattle, and sleep in my own bed again. The drive from Arizona took about 6 hours, and I pulled into my driveway around 10:30 at night, expecting to walk into my quiet, dark house. Instead, I saw lights blazing in every window of the main house, heard a television blaring, and could smell food cooking. Through the darkness, I could also see that someone had left the barn lights on and the cattle were restless in the nearby pasture. My first thought was that I had somehow driven to the wrong house, even though I had been living there for 8 months. I checked the address on my phone, looked at my keys, and confirmed that this was definitely my property. When I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, I felt like I had entered some kind of alternate reality. There was a woman in my kitchen wearing a t-shirt that said, HOA Boss across the front, and she was live streaming on her phone while stirring something on my stove. Day 12 in our HOA supervision house, guys, she was saying to her camera with this sickeningly sweet voice. At my dining table sat a teenage boy wearing a homemade badge that said Security Chief, and he was eating what looked like my leftover pizza from the freezer. On my couch, a teenage girl was typing away on a laptop, creating what appeared to be some kind of official-looking documents. When I asked what the hell is going on here, the woman didn't panic or look embarrassed. Instead, she turned her phone camera toward me and said, "Guys, meet the property owner. Sir, can you introduce yourself to my 847 viewers?" I stood there with my mouth hanging open, trying to process what was happening. This woman then announced in this authoritative voice, "I'm Chairwoman Lana Prescott of Meadowbrook Heights HOA. This property has violated Rule 15-leaving without proper HOA notification." The teenage boy jumped up from the table like he was some kind of soldier and said, "Mom, the subject has returned to the premises without proper clearance." I looked at this kid and said, "Subject? Dude, this is my house." Without missing a beat, he replied, "That's exactly what an intruder would say, sir." I realized that this woman had trained her own son to treat me like a criminal in my own home. Lana Prescott then had the audacity to kindly inform me that I could sleep in my garage if I wanted to, but I needed to remember that HOA quiet hours began at 10 p.m., so no loud noises. She said this like she was doing me some kind of favor by letting me stay on my own property. I was so shocked by the whole situation that I couldn't even formulate a proper response. My security cameras were recording everything that was happening, but I had no idea what to do with that footage yet. As I stood there, trying to wrap my head around this insanity, I noticed that the teenage boy was whispering into a walkie-talkie. "Base camp, target is inside the house. What's phase 2?" he said in this serious voice, like he was conducting some kind of military operation. That's when I realized that these people weren't just squatting in my house temporarily. They had an actual plan, and they intended to stay for much longer than one night. I ended up sleeping in my truck in the driveway that night because I honestly didn't know what else to do. I kept thinking that surely this was all some kind of misunderstanding that would get sorted out in the morning. Maybe these people had been given bad information by someone, or maybe there was some legitimate reason they thought they belonged in my house. But as I lay there in my truck, looking up at my own windows with strangers' shadows moving around inside, I had this sinking feeling that tomorrow was going to bring even bigger problems. I woke up at 6 in the morning to the sound of Lana live streaming her morning HOA routine from my kitchen. Through my truck window, I could see her performing for her phone camera while making coffee with my coffee maker. "Good morning, Clean Army," she chirped into her phone. "Today we're documenting even more violations at this problematic property." I sat there in disbelief, watching this woman turn my home invasion into content for her followers. When I finally worked up the courage to go inside and confront this situation properly, Lana was ready for me with what appeared to be an entire legal presentation. She had printed out a thick folder labeled Meadowbrook Heights HOA Rules and Regulations that looked like it had been put together sometime yesterday. The whole thing was obviously fake, but she presented it with such confidence that I almost started to doubt myself. She opened the folder and began reading from a list of violations that apparently applied to my property. Violation number 1. Eli barked like he was hosting a courtroom drama. "No vacation notice to the HOA board." Lana jumped in without missing a beat. "Number 2, unauthorized cameras." I pointed straight at them. "They're to stop people like you," she gasped theatrically. "Violation of privacy," I laughed bitterly. "They're catching you stealing my house. Evidence tampering," she snapped. "Eli, list that too." Then she tilted her head and added with venomous sweetness, "And abandoning your children during a housing transition? That's emotional negligence." Violation number 3. They were inventing laws faster than I could process. The teenage girl, who I learned was named Tessa, slipped me a note on her phone when her mother wasn't looking. The message read, "Our real house flooded 3 weeks ago. Insurance won't pay to fix it. Mom said we're supervising your house until she figures out what to do." This was the first crack in Lana's elaborate facade, and I realized that this wasn't about HOA violations at all. This woman was homeless and had decided to solve her problem by stealing my house and turning it into some kind of live stream performance. Lana's confidence reached its peak when she started broadcasting to her growing audience of over 1,200 viewers. "This is exactly why neighborhoods need strong HOA protection," she declared to her camera. "People think they can just do whatever they want with their properties." The comments were flooding in with messages like, "Stay strong, mama," and "Protect the community." I watched in horror as people were actually donating money to support her HOA legal defense fund. She was literally crowdfunding her theft of my house. I decided to try a different approach and put on my best customer service voice. "Ma'am, could you please show me the official HOA registration paperwork with the county?" I asked politely. Lana's confident expression flickered for just a moment before she replied, "That's confidential HOA business information that I'm not required to share with property violators," I pressed further. "But surely there's some kind of public record that shows this HOA actually exists." She waved her hand dismissively and said, "The HOA board handles all of that administrative paperwork." During this conversation, I started thinking, like the problem solver I am at work. When I install security systems for clients, I always have to verify that everything is legitimate and properly documented. Something about Lana's whole operation felt hastily thrown together, like she was making it up as she went along. The paperwork looked fake, the violations were ridiculous, and she couldn't provide any real evidence that this HOA actually existed. But she was so confident in her performance that she had managed to convince her own children and apparently hundreds of online viewers that she was legitimate. The power play came when Lana announced that her supervision of my property would need to continue for a minimum of 6 weeks to complete a full compliance review. She said this like it was completely normal and reasonable, as if homeowners regularly had to give up their houses to HOA committees for month-long inspections. I realized at that moment that this wasn't a misunderstanding or a temporary inconvenience. This woman had moved her entire family into my house and was planning to stay for as long as possible. As I was processing this information, I overheard Lana talking on the phone to someone she called Bestie. She was standing in my kitchen, using my coffee and bragging about how donations have already hit $2,000 and how this house is perfect for content creation. She actually said that my house was content gold for her live streaming career. The audacity was breathtaking, but it also gave me something concrete to work with. I spent the rest of the morning observing Lana's operation and taking mental notes. She had clearly done this before, given how smoothly she had everything organized. Eli had been trained to act like security personnel, complete with incident reports and patrol schedules. Tessa was obviously uncomfortable with the whole situation. but she was going along with it to keep peace in the family, and Lana herself was treating the entire theft like it was some kind of public service she was providing to the community. The breaking point came when I realized that Lana had actually changed the locks on my doors while I was sleeping in my truck. She had also put up an official-looking sign in my front yard that read, HOA supervised property, do not disturb. The sign looked professional, like something a real government agency might use, but I knew it was just another prop in her elaborate performance. While Lana thought she had won the first round of this battle, she had forgotten one important detail. I install cameras for a living, and I had just recorded every single lie she had told over the past 24 hours. I checked into a motel down the road and started watching the live feeds from my security cameras on my phone. What I saw was both infuriating and ridiculous. Lana was live streaming daily HOA updates from my living room, giving her followers tours of my house like it was some kind of community center. She had set up a makeshift office in my spare bedroom, complete with filing cabinets and official-looking documents. Her HOA site looked fancy until you noticed the stock photo of a Canadian condo on the homepage. The most hilarious part was watching Eli take his security duties seriously across the entire ranch property. This kid was actually patrolling 15 acres with a walkie-talkie, checking the barn, the fence lines, and even making reports about the cattle. Perimeter secure, no unauthorized vehicles detected, livestock count normal, grass height within acceptable parameters. He had created his own patrol schedule and was documenting everything in a notebook like he was running actual security for a government facility. I had to admit that his dedication was impressive, even though he was technically helping his mother steal my house. When I went back to my property to grab some work tools, I discovered that Lana had taken her performance to the next level. She had not only changed my locks and put up official signs around the main house, but she was also hosting an emergency neighborhood meeting in my ranch's main yard area. She was live streaming the whole thing to over 2,000 viewers while explaining to my neighbors why they needed to support her HOA enforcement actions against my property. The woman was actually trying to turn my own neighbors against me. Mrs. Chen from next door looked confused and said, "But Dean just texted our neighborhood group yesterday from Arizona. He told us when he'd be back." Lana didn't miss a beat and replied, "Exactly. He's been conducting surveillance on all of us from out of state. That's creepy and invasive behavior that violates community privacy standards." I couldn't believe she was twisting my simple courtesy of letting neighbors know my travel plans into some kind of evidence of stalking behavior. That's when I decided to fight fire with fire. I had brought a portable speaker system that I use for work presentations, and I connected it to my phone to play back some of the recordings my cameras had captured. The first audio clip I played was from that morning when Lana was talking to her friend on the phone. "Girl, donations have already hit $2,000. This house is perfect for content creation." The crowd went completely silent, and Lana's confident expression melted into panic as she fumbled to turn off her live stream. The neighbors started asking questions that Lana couldn't answer. "Wait, you're collecting donations?" asked Mr. Rodriguez from across the street. "I thought this was about HOA violations." Lana stammered and tried to explain that the donations were for legal defense funds and community protection services, but her story was falling apart in real time. Someone in the crowd was recording her meltdown on their phone, and I knew that video would end up online within hours. Sure enough, by that evening, someone had posted the video with the hashtag #FakeHOA, and it already had 15,000 views. The comments were brutal, with people calling Lana a scammer and demanding to know how she had gotten away with this for so long. I felt a small sense of satisfaction knowing that her own social media strategy was backsliding on her, but I also knew this would make her more desperate and dangerous. One of my neighbors showed me a screenshot from Lana's live stream that revealed just how elaborate her scam really was. She had set up multiple donation links with different descriptions: support HOA legal defense, help us fight property criminals, community safety initiative, and even ranch agricultural oversight fund. People were actually sending her money because they believed she was protecting their neighborhood from some kind of threat. The fact that she was crowdfunding her theft of my house while playing the victim was absolutely mind-blowing. I started putting together a plan to expose Lana's operation completely, but I knew I needed to be smart about it. Calling the police wouldn't work because she had fake paperwork that looked official enough to fool people who didn't know better. I needed to catch her admitting to the scam on camera, or find some way to prove that her HOA didn't actually exist. The problem was that she was getting more sophisticated with her lies every day, and she had already demonstrated that she could manipulate situations to make me look like the bad guy. The escalation came when I overheard Lana having a family meeting with her kids that evening. Through my security cameras, I watched her explain that they were implementing Phase 3 because this man is trying to steal our temporary home. She was actually convincing her own children that I was the criminal in this situation. Eli was taking notes in his security notebook, and Tessa looked increasingly uncomfortable with the direction things were heading. The most chilling moment came when I heard Eli ask his mother, "Should I call 911 and report the suspicious man who keeps showing up outside our house?" That's when I realized that Lana wasn't just planning to stay in my house indefinitely. She was preparing to escalate this conflict by making me look like a dangerous stalker who was harassing an innocent family. I had thought the worst thing she could do was change my locks and steal my house, but I was wrong. She was planning to destroy my reputation and possibly get me arrested for trying to reclaim my own property. As I sat in that motel room, watching these people live in my house while planning to frame me as a criminal, I knew I was in for the fight of my life. Lana wasn't just a desperate woman who needed a place to stay. She was a skilled manipulator who had turned deception into an art form, and she was about to make me the villain in her next performance. I spent the next morning gathering evidence and preparing to expose Lana's scam once and for all. I had recordings of her admitting that this was about donation money, proof that her website was fake, and documentation showing that no Meadowbrook Heights HOA had ever been registered with the county. I felt confident that I finally had enough ammunition to end this nightmare and get my house back. I was driving toward my property with my phone full of evidence when I saw the police car already parked in my driveway. Lana had beaten me to the punch by calling 911 first, and she had completely flipped the script on our entire situation. When Officer Martinez approached me, he already had a predetermined notion of who was the victim and who was the threat. Lana had reported me as a dangerous stalker who was harassing her family with illegal surveillance and intimidation tactics. She told the police that I was an unstable individual who had been conducting threatening behavior against innocent homeowners who were just trying to do their jobs as HOA representatives. The scene that greeted me was like something out of a nightmare. Lana was standing in my front yard, crying and holding Eli protectively, while explaining to the officer how terrified she was of my escalating aggressive behavior. She had her phone out and was showing Officer Martinez footage from my own security cameras, but she was presenting it as evidence of predatory surveillance rather than documentation of her theft. Every piece of technology I had installed to protect my property was being used against me to make me look like a dangerous criminal. Eli was wearing his homemade security uniform and had prepared what appeared to be a detailed incident report. This 14-year-old kid stood at attention like a little soldier and told the officer, "Sir, the subject has been conducting reconnaissance operations for 3 days. Here's my complete log of his suspicious activities." Officer Martinez was actually impressed by the professional documentation that this child had prepared, not realizing that he was looking at evidence of how thoroughly Lana had manipulated her own son. When I tried to explain that these people had stolen my house and were running an online scam, I realized how insane my story sounded. "Officer, she's live streaming the theft of my house to collect donation money from internet strangers," I said, which made me sound like a crazy person talking about conspiracy theories. Officer Martinez looked at me with skepticism and replied, "He looked at me like I'd just confessed to believing in aliens." "So, she's live streaming your house theft, and people are paying her?" I opened my mouth, but the story sounded insane even to me. As the officer took notes, Lana's voice echoed from her phone. "The stalker has been neutralized. I wasn't just losing my house, I was losing the narrative." "Clean army, we did it," she announced to her camera. "The stalker has been removed from our neighborhood." This is exactly why HOA vigilance works. The comments were flooding in with support. "You're so brave. Protect those babies. HOA heroes saved the day." People were sending her money in real time, celebrating what they thought was a win against some kind of neighborhood menace. The interrogation at the police station was one of the most frustrating experiences of my life. Every piece of evidence I presented made me look more suspicious, rather than less. My security cameras looked like stalking equipment. My recordings sounded like the obsessive documentation of someone with an unhealthy fixation. My motel residence made me appear transient and unstable. Lana had managed to weaponize my own legitimate actions against me, turning my reasonable responses to her theft into evidence of criminal behavior. The turning point came when Officer Martinez mentioned that they had received several other complaints about HOA problems in the area over the past few months. I wasn't the first person to report issues with fake HOA enforcement, but I was the first one who had concrete evidence of what was happening. Previous victims hadn't been able to prove their cases because they didn't have the security footage and recordings that I had collected. This gave me a small glimmer of hope that maybe someone would eventually listen to my side of the story. Meanwhile, back at my house, Lana was hosting what she called an HOA victory celebration for her online audience. The hashtag #HaMomWins was actually trending, and videos of her brave stand against the property stalker were being shared thousands of times. She had turned her theft of my house into a viral success story, complete with merchandising opportunities and plans for expanding her HaHa consulting services to other neighborhoods. The woman was literally building a business empire on the foundation of stealing my home. Tessa was watching all of this unfold from inside the house, and I could see from my security footage that she was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with her mother's performance. She had been reluctantly going along with the family's situation because she didn't have any other choice. But seeing the police get involved and watching her mother celebrate on social media was clearly crossing a line for her. I noticed that she was using her phone to record her mother's live stream, though I didn't understand why at the time. I was released from the police station, but banned from approaching my own property, pending a full investigation. As I sat in my motel room that evening, watching Lana's celebration videos and reading the thousands of supportive comments from people who thought she was a hero, I felt completely defeated. The police believed her story, the internet loved her, and I looked like a dangerous stalker who had been rightfully removed from the situation. It seemed like there was no way to prove the truth when the lie was so much more entertaining. That's when I received a text message from an unknown number that changed everything. "Mr. Whitaker, this is Tessa. I have recordings you need to hear. Can we meet tonight?" I stared at that message for several minutes, hardly daring to hope that it was real. Could the 17-year-old daughter of my nemesis actually be offering to help me? Was this some kind of trap that Lana had set up to gather more evidence against me, or was Tessa genuinely ready to stand up against her mother's increasingly destructive behavior? I thought the game was over when the police sided with Lana and the internet celebrated her as a hero, but sometimes the most unexpected allies come from the most unlikely places. There was one person inside that house who had been watching everything, recording everything, and was finally ready to burn it all down. I was sitting in my motel room at 11:45 that night, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out how my life had gone so completely off the rails. Lana's victory livestream had been viewed over 50,000 times, and the hashtag #HomeOwns was still trending, with people sharing stories about their own battles with difficult neighbors. I felt completely hopeless, like there was no way to convince anyone that I was telling the truth, when the lie was so much more compelling and entertaining than reality. When I heard the quiet knock on my motel door, I almost didn't answer it. Part of me worried that it might be another one of Lana's tricks, or maybe even the police coming back to arrest me for violating some kind of restraining order I didn't know about. But when I opened the door, I saw Tessa standing there in a hoodie, with the hood pulled up, looking nervous and scared. She was holding her phone in her shaking hands, and she kept looking over her shoulder like she was afraid someone had followed her. "Mr. Whitaker," she said in a quiet voice, "I think you need to see this." She held up her phone, and I could see that it was full of audio recordings and video files. "I've been recording my mom secretly ever since we moved into your house. I have everything." She looked like she was about to cry, and I realized that this 17-year-old girl had been carrying an enormous burden while watching her family destroy someone else's life. The recordings that Tessa showed me were absolutely devastating to Lana's case. There were hours of audio where Lana admitted the entire scheme to her friends over the phone. "Bestie, this is pure genius," she had said in one conversation. "Viewer donations have already hit $8,000. The previous houses we tried were too small to create good content, but this ranch is a content goldmine. Plus, the tech guy looks really creepy on camera, so he makes the perfect villain for my audience." Tessa explained that she had been recording these conversations because she was tired of her family's constant moving and lying. "I'm 17, she said. "I want to apply to college, not justify scams. And Eli, he thinks he's helping the world." The pain in her voice was obvious, and I realized that Lana's children were victims of her manipulation just as much as I was. One of the most damaging pieces of evidence was a recording of Lana coaching Eli on how to give false reports to police officers. "Remember, baby," she had told him, "Mr. Dean is the subject and we're the security team. You need to sound professional when you talk to the police, like you're a real security officer making an official report." In the recording, Eli responded with enthusiasm. "Copy that, Mama Bass. I'll make sure to document all of his suspicious activity." Tessa agreed to help me expose her mother's scam, but she had some conditions that I needed to accept first. "Eli can't get in trouble for this," she insisted. "He's just a kid who doesn't understand that he's being manipulated, and my mom needs to get help, not just punishment. I know she's doing terrible things, but she's still my mother, and I don't want her to go to prison forever. I was amazed by this teenager's maturity and compassion, even towards someone who had put her in such an impossible situation. We spent the next hour planning our counterattack against Lana's operation. Tessa would continue recording conversations to gather more evidence of the financial fraud, while I prepared a live stream channel called The Real Truths About Fake HOAs to present our evidence to the public. Our target was Lana's planned grand HOA enforcement finale live stream that she had scheduled for the following evening, where she intended to permanently resolve the property situation with my house. The emotional weight of the conversation hit me when Tessa asked, "Do you hate us?" I looked at this brave teenager who was risking everything to do the right thing. I looked at her. I shook my head. "You saw the truth and chose it. That's something your mom never could." I could see the relief in her eyes when she realized that I didn't blame her for her mother's actions. We worked together to coordinate our evidence gathering and plan the timing of our public revelation. Tessa would hide a recording app on an old tablet that her mother didn't know about, while I set up streaming equipment to broadcast our counter-narrative when the time was right. The plan was to expose everything simultaneously during Lana's big finale show, so she wouldn't have time to spin the story or create new lies to cover up the old ones. Lana had announced her grand, quote-unquote, HOA enforcement finale to her growing audience of over 4,000 followers, promising that she would permanently resolve the property situation and censure community safety for all concerned residents. Based on her previous escalations, I was worried that she might be planning to have me arrested again, or possibly even worse. The woman had already demonstrated that she was willing to weaponize the police and social media against me, and I had no idea how far she might go to protect her scam. As Tessa was preparing to leave, she sent me one final text message that made my blood run cold. "Mom found my hiding spot where I kept my backup phone. She knows someone has been recording her conversations. She's planning something big for tomorrow, and she mentioned calling the police again." I realized that we had run out of time for careful planning and evidence gathering. Lana had discovered that there was a leak in her organization, and when a cornered animal gets desperate, they attack with everything they have. I thought we would have 24 hours to prepare our case and gather our evidence, but Lana had just discovered that someone was working against her from the inside. The final confrontation was coming whether we were ready for it or not. Chapter 6. Final Showdown. 1,250 words. The next morning brought the nuclear meltdown I had been dreading. Lana had discovered Tessa's tablet with my contact information on it, and her reaction was swift and brutal. She confiscated every electronic device that Tessa owned, screamed at her for betraying the family, and threatened to send her to military school for defiant and disloyal behavior. She also forced Eli to become Tessa's full-time guard, tasking him with watching his sister's every move to make sure she couldn't communicate with the outside world. Realizing that her entire operation might be exposed, Lana made the desperate decision to call 911 again, with even more serious accusations. This time she claimed that I had corrupted and manipulated her daughter into creating false testimony against her family. She accused me of having inappropriate contact with a minor and demanded that the police issue an immediate restraining order to keep me away from her children. The woman was willing to destroy her own daughter's reputation to protect her scam. I could see through my security cameras that Lana was in full panic mode, frantically trying to delete her old live streams and social media posts. But the internet never forgets, and thousands of her viewers had already screen recorded and saved her previous broadcasts. The comments on her channels were becoming increasingly suspicious, with people asking questions like, "Wait, this seems fake," and "Ma'am, are you actually scamming people?" Her carefully constructed narrative was starting to crumble in real time. When Officer Martinez contacted me about Lana's new accusations, I made a calculated decision to go all in with my evidence. "Sir," I told him, "I can prove that she's running a donation scam and that everything she's told you is a lie. Just watch what happens when you show up to question her while she's live streaming." I convinced him to conduct what he called a controlled confrontation, where he would arrive at my property while Lana was broadcasting, giving us the opportunity to expose her lies to her live audience. The final confrontation happened exactly as I had hoped, but it was even more dramatic than I had expected. When Officer Martinez arrived at my house with me in tow for a final property inspection, Lana immediately started live streaming the encounter to her audience of over 3,000 live viewers. "Emergency broadcast," she shouted into her phone camera. "They're trying to steal our HOA property. This is government corruption at its finest. They're trying to silence the truth. When Officer Martinez asked to see the official HOA registration paperwork, Lana completely lost control of herself. "I don't need any registration," she screamed at him while still broadcasting live. "I am the HOA. I am the law." The audience went from cheering to silence. A few typed, "Wait, what? The community elected me to protect them." Her meltdown was happening in real time in front of thousands of people, and the comments section exploded with viewers realizing that they had been supporting a scam artist. That's when Tessa pulled off the most brilliant move of this entire ordeal. Despite having all of her devices confiscated, she had set up an automatic upload system on a hidden tablet that her mother didn't know about. While Lana was having her public meltdown, hours of incriminating audio recordings were automatically uploading to a cloud storage account and being shared publicly. The evidence was dropping simultaneously with Lana's livestream breakdown, creating the perfect storm of exposure. The officer didn't argue, he just pressed play. Lana's own voice filled the yard. $8,000, this house is content gold, and the crowd turned. The cognitive dissonance was immediate and devastating. Lana's supporters could hear her own voice admitting to the scam while watching her claim to be an innocent victim in real time. The comments shifted instantly from support to outrage. "Scammer, free that man's house, this lady is completely faked." The most heartbreaking moment came when Eli finally broke down under the pressure of the situation. This 14-year-old kid started crying and said, "I just wanted to play security guard. I didn't know we were stealing someone's house." "Mom, are we the bad guys?" The innocence in his voice cut through all the lies and manipulation, and I think everyone watching realized that these children had been victims of their mother's schemes just as much as I had been. Lana's arrest happened while she was still broadcasting to over 4,000 live viewers. As the handcuffs were being put on her wrists, she continued screaming at her phone camera. "Subscribers! Don't believe what you're seeing! Donate to my legal defense fund! They're trying to silence HOA truth!" But it was too late. The donations had stopped flowing, her account was being suspended for fraud, and her viewers were mass unsubscribing as fast as they could click the button. The viral aftermath was swift and merciless. The hashtag #FakeHOAExposed started trending within hours, with people sharing clips of Lana's meltdown and remixing her "I am the HOA" scream into comedy videos. Eli's innocent security reports became popular internet memes, and Lana's complete breakdown was turned into remix songs and animated GIFs. The internet had moved on from celebrating her as a hero to mocking her as a cautionary tale about social media fraud. I finally got my house back, but the victory felt hollow as I watched Eli and Tessa crying while their mother was loaded into the police car. These kids hadn't asked to be part of their mother's scam, and now they were facing the prospect of being separated in the foster care system. Tessa was 17 and could probably handle the transition to independent living, but Eli was just a confused 14-year-old who had been manipulated into believing he was helping his family survive. The social worker who came to collect the children delivered the news that I had been dreading. The kids will need to be placed in separate foster homes because the system is overcrowded right now. It might be several months before we can find a placement that can take both of them together. Watching these siblings being torn apart felt like a punishment that didn't fit their crime. They had been victims of their mother's manipulation, not willing participants in her fraud. As I stood in my own living room for the first time in weeks, surrounded by the remnants of Lana's fake HOA operation, I realized that winning my house back wasn't actually the end of this story. Justice had been served, and the truth had been revealed, but there were still 2 innocent kids who needed help. Sometimes winning isn't just about getting what you want back. Sometimes it's about doing what's right for people who can't help themselves. 6 months later, I was sitting in a courtroom listening to a judge sentence Lana Prescott to 3 years in prison for fraud, identity theft, and child endangerment. The prosecution had discovered that my case wasn't isolated. Lana had successfully scammed 11 other families across 4 different states over the past 5 years. The total amount of money she had stolen through fake HOA schemes and fraudulent donation campaigns was over $32,000, most of which was recovered and distributed back to her victims. My story had become something of an internet legend during those 6 months. The hashtag #FreeTheRanch had turned into a permanent meme, with people using it whenever they encountered fake authority figures or obvious scammers. Eli's earnest, perimeter secure reports had been turned into popular social media soundbites, and Lana's "I am the HOA" breakdown had become the template for countless comedy videos. The internet's attention span had moved on to other stories, but the case had left a lasting impact on how people viewed HOA fraud. Tessa and Eli had been placed in separate foster homes, as the social worker had predicted, and both of them were struggling with the transition. Tessa sent me regular emails updating me on her progress in school and her college application process, while also sharing concerns about her younger brother's emotional state. Eli was having nightmares and had withdrawn from most social activities, clearly traumatized by the realization that his family's lifestyle had been built on lies and theft. After 3 months of watching these kids struggle in a system that wasn't equipped to help them heal, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I applied to become a foster parent for both Tessa and Eli, with the goal of keeping them together while they finished their education and worked through their trauma. The process was complicated and time-consuming, but I was determined to provide some stability for kids who had never experienced a normal family life. Converting my ranch into a proper family home required significant renovations and planning. I turned the guest room into a teenager-appropriate space for Tessa, complete with privacy and study areas for her college preparation work. The garage was converted into a gaming and homework space for Eli, where he could channel his interest in security and technology into more productive pursuits. Most importantly, I made sure that both kids had control over their own living spaces, something they had never experienced while living under their mother's chaotic regime. The initial resistance from both kids was understandable and heartbreaking. Tessa felt guilty about accepting help from someone her family had victimized, asking me repeatedly, "You were both stuck in a game your mom created. The fact that you're asking these questions means you're already free of it." My response to both of them was simple and honest. You didn't cause this, but you're the ones choosing to end it, and that takes guts. I could see the relief in their faces when they realized that I didn't blame them for their mother's actions, and that I genuinely wanted to help them build better lives. The transformation of our household happened gradually over the following months. I redesigned the ranch's security system to cover the entire 15-acre property so that the kids could feel safe across the whole ranch rather than surveilled and monitored. Tessa discovered a talent for photography and started building a portfolio for her college applications, while Eli channeled his natural interest in security technology into legitimate learning opportunities. Both kids started therapy to work through their trauma and slowly began to trust that they could have a stable home life. 8 months after Lana's sentencing, I decided to visit her in prison to update her on how her children were doing. The woman I met in the visiting room was completely different from the confident live-streaming scammer who had stolen my house. Prison had broken her social media addiction and forced her to confront the reality of what she had done to her own family. "I lost control after my divorce," she admitted through tears. "I felt so powerless, and the live streams made me feel important and successful. But I taught my children terrible things, and I hurt innocent people." "Your kids are safe," I told her. "They're good kids who are working hard to build normal lives. They're gonna be okay." Lana cried harder and said, "Thank you for not abandoning them, the way I abandoned my principles. I know I don't deserve your kindness, but I'm grateful that someone is giving them the stability I never could." It was a difficult conversation, but I felt like it was important for her to know that her children were thriving despite the chaos she had created. 1 year after the whole ordeal began, our transformed family was featured in a follow-up video that received over 1.8 million views. Tessa had been accepted to the state university with a partial scholarship for photography, while Eli had become a legitimate technology expert who was helping my security installation business grow. The ranch had truly become a family home, filled with the normal activities and relationships that these kids had never experienced before. The wholesome callback that everyone loved was that Eli still wore his security shirts, but now he was legitimately monitoring security systems for my clients' ranches and rural properties rather than spying on innocent homeowners. Neighbors would joke with him, saying, "Any HOA violations to report today, Chief?" And he would respond with a grin, "All systems green, ma'am. No fake HOAs detected in this sector." His enthusiasm was genuine now, and his skills were being used to help people rather than harm them. The final message of our story resonated with millions of people who had watched our journey from the beginning. I spent 3 months fighting to get back one ranch, but what I actually gained was something that no HOA could ever regulate or control: a bigger family. My own kids loved having Tessa and Eli around during their visits, and suddenly the ranch felt like it was meant to house multiple generations. The true victory wasn't winning against Lana's scam or exposing her lies to the world. The real victory was giving 2 kids the chance to build honest, productive lives after years of chaos and deception.